The rollout has been one disaster after the next. Actually, you can't even get to the next disaster. You get an error page that says 404 disaster not found.
They ought to take all the guys at the NSA who are so good at hacking into these phone calls and put them to work fixing healthcare.gov. We need to reallocate our nerds.
The U.S. had been listening in on German Chancellor Angela Merkel's cell phone. At this point, I feel like the only world leader our government doesn't listen to is President Obama. That's like...
Today, Obama was in so much trouble, he called Hillary Clinton and he said, "Could you start early?" Crazy.
T-ball for the late night comments this week. Let's talk about it on the Roundtable. I'm joined by Peggy Noonan from the Wall Street Journal, ABC's Matthew Dowd, John Carl is back, and Van Jones from CNN's Crossfire. And Peggy, let's begin. This is kind of pile-on time now.
Yeah, it is.
For the president. I want to show some magazine covers this week as well. You see the New Yorker cover right there, the president with that huge cell phone, trying to get healthcare.gov working. Bloomberg Business Week. Can Obama reboot? And then Forbes, and this is maybe the most interesting one, Vladimir Putin comes up on top of President Obama as the most powerful leader in the world. And Peggy, one of the things they point out is the president has entered his lame duck period early.
Yeah, the Obamacare thing, it appears to me has kind of scarred at least the beginning and perhaps more than the beginning of the second administration. It is the headline, even as Obamacare was the headline of the first administration. You know, Bill Sapphire once said, advice to all journalists, never join a pylon. But at this point, that pylon is not getting smaller. It's just growing because there's nothing to say about Obamacare except from the moment the site debuted straight through to the point that the American people day by day started learning how Obamacare was changing their lives and canceling their coverage and changing it. It has just been a disaster. I've never seen a story quite like this.
And the turnaround's been astounding. Think of where we were just a few weeks ago. The Republicans were blamed for a government shutdown that went on. And it was all this, are the Republicans doomed to, extinction? Poll numbers as low as we've ever seen. And now it's all... That's over. The focus is on the president.
But how do I pressed Dan Pfeiffer about this a little bit. You're at the White House every single day. Behind the scenes, how do they explain how they missed this?
They don't have a good explanation behind the scenes either. I mean, and George, we sat through presentations before this went online, just days before it went online, top people at the White House talking to us about how amazing this website was going to be. And it was not just, this is one portal where you can sign up for the healthcare plan. This was what it was all about.
And even the president's top ally is getting anxious, man.
Well, sure, but first of all, we say that there's nothing good to be said about Obamacare. I think that's not true. If you're a woman, there's a lot of good stuff to be said about Obamacare because you can't be overcharged. If you're part of the 14% of people who are getting dumped and denied and duped who can now get health insurance, there's a lot of good stuff to be said. There's a bigger picture here. We cannot have an adult conversation now in Washington, D.C. about anything. You're right. We've gone from, the Republicans are finished to now Obama's finished. Here's what's really going on. There were winners and losers under the last system, and there are winners and losers under this system. The Republicans were completely indifferent, apparently, to the losers under the last system who were getting dumped and denied. The Democrats now sound tone deaf to the losers potentially under this system. And neither side can come to the table and say, what are we going to do to upgrade Obamacare? What you got now is either defend it at all costs, defund it at all costs, but nobody wants to fix it at a reasonable cost.
The difficulty, I think, right now for the president on this, and obviously there are some good things and there's bad things in all of this, but every answer that the president and the administration gives to, here's the problem, they give an anecdote. Yeah. So they say, here's all these problems. They say, let me tell you the story of this woman that got this health care thing, as if the plural of anecdote is proof. The plural of anecdote is not proof. The plural of anecdote is many anecdotes. Until they show the data, this is what's going on, how is it working, how many people are signed up. But bigger for the problem for the president, and I faced this with the president that I worked for, at the same
Coming out of Katrina,
it wasn't all about Katrina. The president's problems have been brewing for a while. What the Republican circus did was cover up a lot of the president's problems, that circus that went on with the Republicans for a while. And then once that was over, it revealed a deeper problem with the presidency. And I think what you have right now is you talked about the floor of the president's approval numbers, which are almost exactly where President Bush's were. Every time you establish a new floor, you establish a new ceiling.
Yeah.
And when you have a new ceiling, that causes a president problem for the next 3 years.
I want to bring this to you because it seems like one of the things that ties together Katrina and this situation right now is that for the first time in President Obama's case, I think in a serious way, his competence and the competence of the White House is being questioned as opposed to more of an ideological objection.
Boy, I really agree, and I think the heart of it is this. The president can talk. The administration is wonderful at talk. They never miss a talking point, a speech. They never forget to feed the audio. They never forget to do, forgive me, you know how I speak of it, the propaganda. But execution and getting it done and creating the program and making it run and making it work has been a complete failure. So I think there's the sense around there that the people around the president or the people in the White House or the administration have a magical sense that if they say something, that thing will will itself into
Let me bring this to Van, because how do you explain this question of execution here? One of the things we're reading in the Washington Post this morning is actually there was a lot of warnings ahead of time that maybe the president should bring in a health care czar to run this whole thing because the execution problems were going to be so serious. You were a czar in the White House.
Czars are very popular at that point. I remember very well how popular falling out of favor. All the people criticizing the president now said they wanted more czars. I remember that. Right. I mean, again, and this is the part of the problem. It's silly season. They have this sort of almost Obama derangement syndrome where Obama is this absent, weak, ineffectual dictator and tyrant who's destroying America. No matter what this president does, they roll out a narrative that says either he's absent, he's not paying attention, or he's a dictator and tyrant trying to steal your rights. These things can't be true at the same time. Part of what is going on, and what I'm disturbed about, is I know this president is not a hands-off leader. He is famously engaged. I'll tell you what, when you work in the White House, you write something, you know one person in that building is going to read it, and his name is President Obama. And so something went wrong here. But the idea that somehow he's inattentive, he's not paying attention, all that's ludicrous. This is a very hard thing to pull off.
He's certainly engaged now. And I'll tell you, Jeffrey Zients, who's taken this on, he's, the new czar, and Chief of Staff McDonough went up to the Hill to talk to Democrats who were very nervous about this. And what Democratic senators said, I'm told him, is point blank, can we go back and tell our constituents, promise them that this website will be up and running by November 30th? The answer was absolutely. So now you have the real test on this. And I'll tell you, they are worried about this. And one Democratic senator who was in that meeting says that what they're also worried about, George, is the next shoe to fall is will employers start to be dropping.
George, one thing, and I agree with Van on this, the mix of conflicting ways they describe the president is just so ludicrous. It's at opposite ends of the table. The president isn't a dictator. The president actually has great intentions. The president wants to help the American public. The president wants to solve health care. The president wants to do all that. Much of, though, it has been done incompetently. And the president's not a socialist. I mean, you don't turn over our healthcare system to the major insurance companies of the country, which is what has happened with insurance with this new healthcare.gov. It's given to the insurance company. He's not a socialist. But the problem,
a lot of regulation.
The problem for the president is, though, that on competence is one time is a fluke, 2 times is a coincidence, 3 times is a trend. And when every response to every major crisis, you say, I didn't know what was going on, or the president didn't know what was going on, that builds a trend that is not good for the president.
And bottom line, guys, 3.5 years to execute the central promise and the central meaning of your own administration, and it flops. You almost have to try to fail with 3.5 years. I got to tell you.
I'll tell you two things. First of all, they tried to do too much on this website. You could just have a website where you allow people to shop and then they could call in. They tried to do too much, and I think part of it was because it was a central thing, they tried to do too much. But it is amazing to me now to see the Republican Party now become the party of Ralph Nader. They're the biggest consumer protection operation in the world now. But 6 months ago, we had people who were getting these same cancellation notices, and the Republican Party was silent. There's a problem when you're indifferent to the losers the last time. I want to make one thing perfectly clear. You look at the numbers here. 14%. Only 14% of Americans were able to keep these individual market plans for 2 years before. In other words, 80% almost of Americans were being thrown off these plans.
The president made a promise. He made a promise,
and he overpromised. And he will pay a price. Mission accomplished, you pay a price. No new taxes, you pay a price. You keep your plan, you pay a price. But we went from 14% losers to 3% losers. It's not 100%. Let's work together to get to 100% and stop the politicking.
Gonna have to take a break right there. A lot more coming from you guys in just a little bit.